All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Jen Wesson, and I am the Executive Director of the Head of the Schuylkill Regatta. And on behalf of the Board of Directors and the Committee 50, we welcome you to our 21st Story Hour. The women of PGRC are going to lead us through the history of the Philadelphia Girls Rowing Club, the oldest competitive women's rowing club of its kind in the United States. The clubhouse, located at 14 Kelly Drive on historic Boathouse Row in Philadelphia, was built in 1861. As the earliest of the surviving Boathouse Row structures, it serves to anchor the other houses that are strung along the banks. The house has a distinction of symbolizing both the history of the sport of rowing as well as the place of women in our sport. As you'll learn tonight, how these women pulled together this to save the structure for future generations, you will also see and feel their passion and determination. And that kept them going through this 25-year plus project. The same passion that the founders and of over 150 years ago. So I just wanted to go over just a few very short housekeeping items to help with the sound and the flow of the evening. Even though the Zoom format can be a little tricky with a large group, we continue to use it because we feel it's really important for people to see one another, to see reactions and smiles and laughter. Because the storytellers are not only sharing with us, but we are sharing with them and recognizing and appreciating their contributions and successes in our community. So I have muted everyone to eliminate any background noise. You have the ability to unmute yourself at any point in time, but please just be mindful of any background noise that you may have. You can use the chat room throughout the evening to ask questions or add to stories. In fact, if you want to go ahead right now and say hello in the chat room and tell us where you're from, that's always a fun way to start out. We'll run to about 8:15 tonight. We'll allow time at the end for questions, so we don't interrupt during the presentation. In addition, I just want everyone aware that I am recording this session, so it's available for those that could not be with us tonight. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our evening's lead presenter, Donna File. Donna came to rowing at age 35 after 7 years of encouragement by a PGRC coach. She quickly fell in love with the sport, attending many rowing camps to improve her technique. Nevertheless, she raced poorly, and that's not from me, that's from Donna. Donna served as club captain, vice president, secretary, novice coach, and Schuylkill Navy representative. Additionally, Donna volunteered as an assistant coach at Malvern Prep and accompanied the team to Egypt, where she notably rowed on the Nile in 1999. Pretty awesome. Donna served as vice commodore of the Schuylkill Navy from 2000 to 2004 and was a referee for a few years. She's a union carpenter by trade and worked as a safety director for LF Driscoll with a 44-year career in building construction. She's built many notable buildings, including Liberty One, the Kimmel Center, the Phillies Ballpark, Comcast 1 and 2, the Penn Pavilion, and worked on renovations at the Academy of Music, HUP, and CHOP. She obtained her master's degree from Penn in organizational dynamics in 2006. With her background in building construction, Donna has been involved in PGRC building committee and preservation campaign for 25 years. You're in for a treat tonight with a remarkable group of women. So no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Donna to get started. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Jen, and welcome everybody. We started, Jen's going to switch to a poster here, First on the Row in 1861 and First for Women in 1938 on the row. And we had this poster made for, as we recall, the 75th anniversary of PGRC. I also want to thank our PGRC project team, Sophie Sosha, our president, Dori Bova, our architect, Cindy D'Ambrosio, our preservation chair and grant writer, and Lily Milroy, our club historian. I want to acknowledge Anna Stillner's master thesis, the Philadelphia Girls Rowing Club, an incremental historic structure report that has become an incredible document for us to move forward. A lot of things started to happen simultaneously, and we'll get into that, but the point of this presentation here today is the campaign that we called Shore Her Up. Shore Her Up, our grand old lady of Boathouse Row. And it's been a long commitment. Don't be daunted by it. Sometimes we buoy each other's spirits, and we'll get into our major projects. But first, I want to turn it over to Lily Milroy, who's going to give us a brief history of Boathouse Row and the park and the Girls Club building.
Thanks, Donna. Hi, everybody, and I'm just going to remind us of the history of the building itself. It was actually built in 1861. The city of Philadelphia had acquired an estate known as Lemon Hill, and had established there what they called Fairmount Park. And this is the first section of Fairmount Park, which would get larger and larger over the next 15 or 20, or actually 20 or 30 years. But in 1859, they hired a couple of landscape architects to do landscaping of Lemon Hill. And it was at that time that the boathouse was built. And you can see it there circled in red on the left-hand slide. And notice you'll see another couple of boathouses just to the right of that, to the east of that on the row. Those were the early timber structured temporary boathouses that had been built by some of the other boat clubs at that time. And it was when the Fairmount Park Commission was created in 1867 that they swooped in and told the boat clubs that you had to build a permanent building. So those are two images of earlier boathouses on the row. And on the right is the plan for the landscaping, and you can see there's the boathouse circled in red again. Jen, could I have the next slide, please?
Mhm.
So another important thing to remember is that the boathouse, there you can see it on the right-hand photograph, the cupola poking up over the trees. It was actually built to house what was known as the Philadelphia Skating and Humane Society. And it was the Humane Society, not because it had anything to do with animals, but because in the 1860s, you could skate on the Schuylkill River because it froze. And the Humane Society were skaters who were also trained to rescue people who fell through the ice. And the photograph on the left is a photograph from the 1860s of people skating on the Schuylkill. And probably that photograph was taken from standing right next to the Humane Society boathouse. Could I have the next slide, please, Jen? So the Humane Society used the boathouse until right around the 1911, 1912. When they started, they had to move to other locations to find a skating location because the Schuylkill didn't freeze anymore. The pollution was so bad that the river didn't freeze. And so they were looking for other places to skate. And by the 1930s, they actually they moved to Haverford. And they are still in Haverford. The Philadelphia Skating Club actually is in another historic building in Haverford now. And it was in 1938 that they leased the boathouse to a group of women who had started rowing and wanted to start a club. And there they are in 1938. They leased it until we were able to purchase the boathouse in 1962. And I guess next slide, please. And these were the founders, 17 women who decided that they wanted to row. Some of them already knew how to row, but they wanted to actually organize as a club so that rowing could be made more available to more women. And something that a lot of people don't know is that women were rowing and were racing in the 19th century, but they didn't have clubs. They didn't have a reliable place to go. And so the founders came together in 1938 to form the Philadelphia Girls Rowing Club, and we're still very proudly the Philadelphia Girls Rowing Club, and now the stewards of the oldest boathouse on the row. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Donna.
Thank you. Sophie, did you want to say anything else about the founders?
Oh, I just wanted to say that the 17 women, there was an ad placed in the local paper asking for women to answer the ad that wanted to row, and over 100 of them answered the ad. The 17 that remained were the ones that had $5 that they could pay. dues. The others didn't have the money. The four movers and shakers were Lovey Farrell, Ernestine Bayer, Jeanette Hoover, and Ruth Robin Holt. And Ruth stayed with the club until 2 months before her 100th birthday. So the others left because they had children, but we remember them fondly, and they used to come back for celebrations. Jeanette Hoover's family still keeps in touch with us. Nancy Farrell was the stroke of the Vichy 8, and she was Lovey Farrell's daughter. And Ellen Miller is a niece of one of the founders.
Thank you, Sophie. So what we're looking at here is some structural settlement that occurred to the boathouse over time. And you can see the circled windowsill that was out of level by maybe 4, 5, or 6 inches. And the area with the arrows and blocks is where an underground stream had created some damage to wood piles and the foundation at that elevation. In 1988, the club hired Tom Dowd, a PE, who was a member of Fairmount, to develop a plan to stabilize the structure using pin piles and strap beams. And we had measured we had hair monitors on the wall, and it absolutely stopped the movement of the structure. So we were about to also epic flooding. The Girls Club, wrong organization, is the lowest building on the row. And while we would take water in our boat bays, almost none of the other clubs would. During Floyd in 1999, I was the captain, and the water pressure crushed a hull of a single. And Ida in 2003, you can see we have our builder put lines on the wall for our epic floods. And the flooding, of course, exacerbated the structural issues. But we were about to start a window campaign, and my mother and I were very close, and I said, "Oh, Mother, we're going to do this." And she goes, "Oh, no, we have to get Keystone Hood involved. And I'm going to call my friend Susanna Pence." My mother was a preservationist in Old City. And before I knew it, my mother joined the club, she joined the committee, and we had a whole new direction, which is great. And I want to give a special shout out to Brian Wentz. He's our structural engineer. He's been a good friend of the club for a long time. About the same time, once we got the report from Keystone Hood, it was obvious that our building was in dire straits, and it wouldn't last 100 years. So the board attended a luncheon at the Union League by the, could you go back to the previous slide? I'm not quite done with that one. The Association of Fundraising Professionals, who wound up hiring Farr Healy to conduct a philanthropic study, and subsequently Wendy Epstein from our own club to help us. You can go ahead then. Thanks. So the fundraising progresses and a campaign is launched. And at the same time, a lot of things are happening at the same time. Probably the theme of my entire presentation here. So we had a Dory Bova and Judy Rep developed a master plan with the drawings from Keystone Hood, and it turned out to be so large that we needed to break it out into phases. So these are the major phases that Dory's going to talk about later. And Shore Her Up became our campaign motto. Subsequently, Sophie and I attended a course at Villanova on fundraising so that we could wrap our heads around, like, what's the difference between a capital campaign and another campaign. We went for a whole semester, and I went back and looked at the curriculum. It was pretty amazing. So the master plan was developed, and we had another thing that happened in there was we had Becker and Frondorf prepare 2 or 3 professional estimates from the plan, because every time you delay whatever you're going to do, inflation is going to inflate the building process, the cost of the process. So Dory, you want to jump in here and tell us about phase 1, please?
Dory, you're going to have to unmute.
Sorry, thought you
There you
guys
go.
had. Yeah, so our phases were actually the first phase was structural stabilization. The second phase was the exterior envelope, and the third phase is the interior. And in the previous slide, you saw the sub phases underneath all those. And the first one of the structural stabilization is the whole boat bay slab was removed and re-poured with a thicker slab, and I can go into more detail. So this is showing our interior of our boat bays, obviously, and we excavated down in order to pour a 2-foot thick slab. Our original intention was to eventually have floodgates at the doors, so that we never have to clean mud out, 3 inches of mud out of the out of the boat bays again. And this meant that we had to previously, when the water would come in, there was no pressure in the wall because you've got water all around it. Once you prevent it from coming in, now you have to resist all that water from the sides and below. So we had steel beams embedded in the concrete and tied to the exterior foundation walls, and the slab itself was 2 foot thick. And so this is the excavation down in order to do that 2 foot thick slab. And obviously we have a whole house above this. So the columns, they're cast iron columns, and they obviously had to remain in place. And so we had 16 concrete trucks out in front of Sedgley with a gigantic, tube coming in to pour this whole thing. And then once it was poured, I think we can go to the next one. So once it was all poured, and I did look up that information about it, it was a 7-day break. So it was cured for 7 days, and we installed this grillage, which is holding up the whole house, in order so that we could take the cast iron columns out, refurbish them, and pour their footings separately. And so, and the picture with the circle shows the box out for where the column footing will be poured. It's not there yet. And so this whole grillage that you're looking at is holding up our house while we have no columns in the boat bays.
The other thing, Dory, I just want to jump in is that a photograph of the excavation, that if we had had a flood during that period, the whole house could have collapsed. I mean, it could have been catastrophic. So it was kind of a dicey time.
Right. And we did the construction, we started mid-December. So that's not typically when a harbor floods, so that was good, but it was in the middle of winter, so we had to contend with that as well. In the process, we had arranged for, in that grillage, we had our floor, because of that whole wall that we saw earlier that sunk, this whole front room sloped down a good 6 inches from front door back to the river. And the intention was to try and jack up those columns there were jacks installed on that grillage. So once they were in place, they slowly had to, crank the jacks up, and we got about 1.5 inches, and things started cracking, and plaster started cracking, and we decided to halt the process at that. We'd hoped to get a little bit more, like maybe 4 inches, but we couldn't get that far. And so we devised a way to level the first floor by sistering joists at the first floor level. So this is what you're looking at here. We had to open up the floor and sister all the joists to make it flatter. So the original joists are still slanted, and the ones that are sistered are flat. And it's still not 100% flat, but it's a whole lot flatter. We can go to the next slide.
And then the next phase was the masonry cleaning and repointing. And this is where we had hired materials conservation, John Carr, as a consultant who developed the scope and the cleaning process and did mortar testing. And I think we can go to the next slide.
Mhm.
And there we are, just, we had to test out, how we wanted the mortar struck, and you can see it's got that particular shape to it now. On the right-hand side, the mortar has been all raked out at this, what you're looking at there. And we can go to the next slide. And part of that whole project was this medallion that is above the front door. On the top left is the skating club, the original skating club medallion. When they left, they took that with them. And infilled at the bottom picture, you can see there's just infill, and it wasn't exactly the best match of stones and technique. And in this masonry project, we were able to recreate basically the shape of that, shape and size, but with our name on it now. And the next picture. So the next project in this exterior was all the windows and exterior woodwork. We had tossed around the idea of replacing it all together, replacing the windows with insulated windows. We went back and forth. And not only was it more cost effective just to refurbish the existing, but we had a lot of the original glass. And so we decided to just keep that and go with that. And I think we have another picture of the next page. Yeah, so this was the wall that you saw earlier that had dropped, and we had to contend with just this, I call it my funhouse window. Just so we had to just work with it. And so and next one. Next slide. Okay, and there we go. We have all the projects and the exterior woodwork. Part of the window project was also all the exterior woodwork. We had a lot of, we had some repairs done and repainting, and the windows painted, and they were taken out all together and refurbished elsewhere. So and they were done in phases. So the windows were blocked up, so this is the result. We had the front steps reset and mortared in place. And yeah, next one. And then we're back to the timeline. So the last phase of the exterior project is what we're looking at today. And we want to, our deck that is facing the river, shows signs of the columns show signs of rotating outward, and we have had patches put on them with steel angles at the columns tied back to the building. If you look inside, some of the the joists are like pulled out of the pockets, and it's being held back by this steel structure, and it's a little bit of a mess. And so we are going to, the foundations are, and the soils were probably not good either. So our next phase is removing that entire deck and putting down new foundations and a brand new, building up using the old stone and rebuilding it.
Cindy, you want to jump in here and talk about some of our fundraising events that we've had over the years?
Sure. Thanks, Dory and Donna. As you can see, there's a lot of different activities that have gone on. Certainly, one of our major activities was floating a bond among the club members. So this was purely amongst the club members, and we raised $88,000. And at this point, this was for phase one. This was for the structural stabilization of the boat bays. And when we got started to then move on to the exterior, we had a party for preservation. We've also in 2017 were awarded a Keystone Historic Preservation grant for the exterior masonry restoration of $80,000. And I want to, these are issued through the Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission. And they are matching grants. You'll see later on, we got a second one. They're matching grants. And so we also still had to raise the other part of it. And also, it's interesting to note that these were not exactly half of the costs of each of these projects. So they were definitely a very welcome boost in order for us to be able to start and finish these projects. But you can see a lot of the other activities that were done by club members, various club members, not just the preservation committee or the building committee or the board of the club. I mean, the members took on incredible responsibilities of running parties, selling glassware, selling Boathouse Row ale. We did, as you can see here, a virtual event. Actually, it was 2021. We found that out. And we even did a panel discussion on Boathouse Row restoration projects. And recently we did a white elephant sale, and our latest fundraiser was raised about $36,000. And so we are really, really blessed with having a membership that pitches in and really, really is passionate, not only about the club and rowing, but also about preserving the building.
Thanks.
I don't know if there are any questions about what we did.
I think I'd just like to jump in here and say that in the beginning, it became important to me to approach club members who I knew would be able to participate at a high financial level and ask them to meet my pledge. And there were 5 of us that did that. And I went to the board after we had that money and asked the board to match what we had raised already. So the board did that, and they realized then that the old wooden crappy boat racks that we had, we went out and got brand new aluminum Fred Hill boat racks, and we had lighting designed by Linda Shade and her husband's a mechanical company. So our boat racks today are spanking new compared to when I joined the club in 1990. Sophie, do you have any other key points that you want to talk about fun? The other thing I want to say, speaking of Sophie, and I talked to Chris about this earlier today, one of the most important things of this entire project, from, even pre-2000 all the way up to the future of 2026, is we've had consistent leadership with Sophie Sosha. And if you have to depend on having a new president every couple years to embrace a project that's so broad and so deep in scope, I think it would be more challenging. But we're just blessed to have such great leadership and for her to be a major part of the entire process.
Excellent.
Oh, the other thing that I probably should have mentioned at the outset is these grants and probably a lot of the other, the willingness on the part of the public and the, to participate in a lot of our fundraising is the fact that the club is part of Boathouse Row, which is on the National Historic Register. And that really has given us an entree to those grants.
And Cindy, could you talk a little bit? I know we applied for Save America's Treasures in 2008, just as the economy had really deteriorated into a deep recession. And do you want to talk a little bit about the new application for Save America's Treasures that is due in December?
Yeah. It's the Save America's Treasures grants are grants for construction for buildings that are on the National Historic Register. And they are administered through the National Park Service, which is part of the Department of the Interior. And yes, as Donna mentioned, one was attempted in 2008, but the funding never materialized for the program because of the economic issue, the situation. But I actually just today saw and noticed that they are now going to accept new applications for Save America Treasures grants starting today through December 12th. So we are hoping that we can apply. And again, these are also matching grants. So you don't get, your whole project funded. You do have to have some skin in the game, which I think is smart. And so we hope to be able to submit an application before the December deadline. And fingers crossed, hopefully we'll be able to start that last phase of the exterior project in not too far future.
If I can just jump in for a second, not only is Boathouse Row on the National Historic Register, as Cindy mentioned, but it's also a National Historic Landmark, which
Yes.
puts it in an even higher tier of significant cultural resources. So, and that's the entire row as part of the row.
And our building, our clubhouse in particular, is on the Philadelphia, you probably know, Lily, what the proper name is. Register of Historic Places.
Well, Boathouse Row is all of the boathouses are on the
Yeah.
local, what they call the local register.
Yeah.
So, Cindy, in applying for the Keystone Historic Preservation Grant, what sort of architectural engineering and construction documents and plans did you have to submit in order to achieve the grant?
Let's see. I mean, there was a number of narratives and descriptions of the project that you wanted to accomplish. And I know that we also submitted things like Anna Miller's thesis, talking about the importance, historic importance of the building. We submitted materials conservation had done a report on, like, the first grant would be the masonry. And then we also submitted for the second grant, I believe we submitted more, actually, it was also materials conservation that had a report on the status of the windows and things. And so we also submitted the proposals from the contractors that were going to do it. We had to submit a budget for sure. And there were quarterly reports that had to be submitted with photos of the work.
And I just want to thank Cindy publicly, because not only is she our chair of the committee, of the preservation committee, but she's our champion grant writer, and she has been very successful in obtaining sizable amounts of money for our projects.
And Donna, Rick Stalick, and Sophie, the course you took at Villanova, can you maybe expound upon that? Because it sounds like between the three of you, that was kind of key to helping you to identify all these potential sources of income from grants. And that sounds like such an important step you took that many other people haven't taken.
Donna,
You want to speak to that first?
yeah,
Sophie?
you say it.
Well, the course basically outlined different types of fundraising: annual events, capital events, the difference between one way or another, and also building a culture of philanthropy in the club. And I had some things on here that weren't actually fundraisers, but they were events, even like when we had a party for the Vichy 8 in the past few years. It built a camaraderie amongst and beyond the membership, so that it became part of the culture of philanthropy. And that was probably the biggest thing that we learned, because the study said we had none. And we had to have events that were non-money related to kind of prep the membership towards what would be expected in the future. And the other thing is that we realized that this doesn't address the Villanova course, but, and I wish I'd read it again today, but we had previously been on a 5-year plan for boat turnover.
Yeah.
And with the preservation, the board realized that if we didn't buy boats, it would save, maybe $150,000 a year or more. And because what you get when you sell a boat is exponentially less of what, even after 5 years, that kind of was the window that Joanne Montowski put together for capitalizing on the age of a boat and what you could sell it for. Once we stopped buying boats, the board was able to save a considerable amount of money and then pitch in above whatever money we had raised with the preservation.
But we've restarted buying boats. It was just a
We have
one-time.
since started
Yeah.
buying boats, but in the very
Temporary pause.
beginning,
Yeah.
when we started the process, we stopped buying boats.
And also to answer your question a little bit, Rick, we also did hire a woman who was someone who drew up a list of over 20 local organizations who, would fund various grants, gave out various grants. And we applied to, I think, almost every single one of them without success. And the interesting thing is the one, she did have like this little note on her list that these Keystone Historic Preservation grants were available, but she really wasn't sure that we qualified. And we just decided
To do it.
And I think I called the woman who, I can't remember her name now, but Karen, at any rate, who was the administrator in Harrisburg. And I explained, and I said, I'm not sure we will exactly meet all of your requirements. And she said, you know what? She said, you should just apply. What's the harm in applying? And that's how we have first applied for the 2017 grant.
And I do remember when we started talking about this, we were told, and if you guys remember this, let me know, or if I have it wrong, I don't know. I remember being told that there's only grants for the design of, the sort of preliminary stuff and design of it, that we'll never get any grants for the actual construction part. And yeah, I have a memory that we were kind of told that, maybe not in so many words, but that, it's going to be really hard to find money for the construction part. But obviously that turned out to not be true.
I
Luckily,
think the
right?
other thing I want to say is that Judy and Dory, to develop the master plan, they developed the plan at 50% of their fee. So, and Dory has continued to volunteer over the past 25 years to work with Keystone Hood, who they're paid by us to develop their designs. And Dory's been incredibly generous with her time and her talent. And I know I'm specifically grateful for that.
You're here.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide.
Welcome.
Yeah.
So Dory, we have two other big income producers for our club, our general funds. And Dory, you want to give just a little brief background about the Bill Braxton Regatta?
Yes. Yes, the Bill Braxton Regatta started in 1974. It's a memorial regatta for this person, Bill Braxton, who was a student at Marietta and was killed in a car accident. I think after his, was it sophomore year or junior year? He had a really winning year that year. And during the summer, he was killed in a car accident, and their family decided to create this regatta in his memory. And that was so the first regatta is in 74, and several of our members were involved with that very first regatta. Over the years, I think it was the late 80s, the family decided it came to the conclusion that we would take the regatta over and run it in conjunction with the family. We worked with them all the time, but that it became a fundraiser for us. In 1976, we started scholarships for high school students going into college, rowers, and so we've awarded a scholarship from the funds raised from the Bill Braxton Regatta to fund that scholarship. And it's also, like Donna said, it's a large income producing for the club as well.
And also, I don't know if Diana Post, I know she's here. The Agnes Irwin School became one of our tenants in the 90s when she was president. If you could say just a word or two, if you can unmute.
Hi, yeah. Well, I had a big advantage. At the time, I was rowing a double with Carol Bauer, and she was then at the time the coach at Penn. And so I went out to the Agnes Irwin School one evening to talk to interested families. And I remember that Carol had told me that a rowing experience could give a kid an extra few points in the application process. And I heard the whole room I knew we had them at that point. So they came to the club. They've been junior members racing with us in the fall, and it's a great asset having the kids around, training future women.
Thank you. Next slide, Jen. Dory, you want to talk about the piers and deck, our final phase of the structural?
Yeah, this is the final phase of it's sort of a part exterior and part structural stabilization. So that whole addition, which was an addition at somewhere, well, the pictures we have from the 1930s show the deck, these piers built out this far. Those were never original, but they were there in the 1930s. Not sure when they were built. And then the deck. That whole structure, the deck part is coming off, and we are doing new foundations and rebuilding the piers exactly everything from the ground up into the fascia will look very similar. And we're gonna do a little bit nicer railing, and that's still in the works. But when we take off the deck, we'll have to finish the exterior cleaning and pointing of whatever masonry is behind there from the original building. But then we'll reinstall this as you see it here.
Thank you. Next slide. So we're really preserving the legacy of our founders. Ruth Robinhold, I enjoyed probably too many martinis with her. She was quite a martini drinker. I didn't like her martinis, but nevertheless, I still drank with her. But, more poignantly, when Jeanette Hoover died, we ran this ad, and Sophie might know the history of it, but in the face of harassment and ridicule from male rowers, Jeanette, the youngest of the founders, was 16 when she began her rowing career in 1938. Your gift today will help ensure that no other woman will feel the sting of ridicule or discrimination because she wants to row. And that's just so poignant, and it's what Chris and Rick have said many times. And Sophie, do you want to jump in here and say anything else?
Well, I think this group did a marvelous job in presentation. The Hoover family is very, very important to us. They still keep in touch with us and support the club every year. And Ruth told me that Jeanette was the only one of the founders that had a car. So they made sure they were off the water just in time to get a ride to the bus in Jeanette's car. But those two paragraphs in that square say it all.
They do.
Please go to our Philadelphia Girls Rowing Club.org website for more information on the history of the club. There are a lot of photographs through the ages from 1938 all the way through the 2020s. And, it's just been a privilege to help develop this presentation. And Chris or Jen or Rick, if there are questions, I'm sure our team would be able to address them.
Yes, I have the first question for Dory and Donna. And I've just been thinking of this after looking at the photos of the early building and seeing the changes that have been made over time. But we've done many story hours on historic preservation, in areas like Seattle, Detroit, Philadelphia, and elsewhere, Boston. And to the best of my knowledge, PGRC is the only historic rowing club that I am aware of, and Rick can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but it was not originally designed as a rowing shell house. And I'm just wondering, are there any inherent design constraints that you have to confront because of that? Do you are the dimensions of the boat bays, the way the racks are stacked? Does this present a challenge to you that it was designed for canoes and for people skating, and it wasn't really designed for shells? Now, the oldest boathouses, of course, were designed before eights, so they had to be expanded in the future, but they were designed to hold long shells. So, what can you speak to that?
Actually,
Can I do that?
can I just jump in for 2 seconds? And that is, there's some indication, Chris, that the skating club allowed some rowers to store their shells in the boathouse.
That's in the Stillner report.
Yeah, those would have been singles, so they would have been smaller boats. But there's no mention of canoes with this particular boathouse. That's the case with Sedgley, but not. But that, and again, it's kind of word of mouth in the 19th century. So there certainly were rowing boats and racing shells stored in the boathouse.
Yes.
Back to Dory and Donna.
Your photo.
Yeah, we
in your talk, you look at the earliest photo that you had from 1930, and or no, I mean the one when it was from the era that the club was founded in the skating side, and it looks like a boathouse on Boathouse Row, and from that elevation that you show, but it was really not.
Right.
No.
So it was
the original house had a small balcony, only about 6 feet deep, like from the house out, a little porch, more or less, where we have the deck.
And you climb through the window to get out there.
Right. And so that was eventually taken off somewhere along the line. And as you said, that 1930s picture showed it, the dimensions that it is today, where it's built out. That deck is built out, and I think it's what, 12 feet deep now or something like that. I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. And the eights that we used to have eights when I first started rowing in 1986, and they stuck out of the door of the original boathouse and into that extension.
Right.
So the boathouse isn't not long enough for an 8 for starters. And it's also, the inside boat bay is very low head height. And we managed to squeeze in how many layers? Four layers of boats. I don't know how we do it, but I go into other boathouses and I just have, boathouse envy in a way.
So the other
the height of the boat bays. Yeah.
Other boathouses stand their oars up, and we don't have enough ceiling height to stand our oars up. So our oars are all horizontal on wooden pegs.
And we have insulation in our, at the underside of the ceiling of the boat bays, and it's kind of banged up because it's how low it is. It gets hit.
And if you look at a photograph that Dory was referring to, when they built out the deck they actually didn't fill it in, so that it didn't expand the size of the interior boat bay. That happened sometime after that photograph. That
Right.
photograph was taken in 1933. So so it may actually have been as a result of the girls' club moving in that the
But
those piers
they
were
enclosed
cleaned
it.
and closed it. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. But
Yeah,
you're
it was
right, Chris.
originally open.
The house was not designed to be a boathouse because there were already boathouses on Boathouse Row. They were just not considered permanent structures at that time. And that's when the Park Commission came in 1870 and said, okay, guys, you've got to build permanent structures.
And
That's
also,
when,
also really wasn't, it's true that all the original boathouses, ramshackle as they were designed around the premise of everybody rowing barges, which dimensionally were much shorter than eights
right.
and fours. And so like all the clubs had to expand to accommodate the new idea of
Shells.
racing shells we know today. I think,
Yeah.
and I think Undine is probably the only club that was designed from the get-go to accommodate
Correct.
George shells. And Frank Furness, in all his wisdom, certainly made, you know, but all the other clubs, you know, mine included, Malta, we struggled with years of from being added on to and added up in all sorts of very strange ways, which created an unbelievable amount of structural problems we're dealing with today, the same way that you are, Dory, and everybody else. It
Right.
just, you know, it just was so haphazard, even when they went to permanent structures.
and you know, Undine used to have this amazing painting of the first race on the Schuylkill, and there are actually eights being raced. That there were 8-man barges
Yeah.
being raced. So there were pretty big boats in some of those boathouses, but as Rick said, of a different design than what we are accustomed to nowadays.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
Well, please chime
Chris,
in. If
or
anybody
anything
else
in
has
that
any other
box?
questions, please chime in. Remember to unmute yourself first.
So I have one. It's more of a comment that I learned when I did my research for the book Boathouse Row. A couple of the clubs did not have houses after the Fairmount Park ordered them to build picturesque or stone houses. So in the winter, the skating club was in the club, and in the summer, you had University Barge Club was there for a while, and also Undine was there for a while. And one of the funny things I found is that the locker space in the skating club was so small that a couple of the guys sort of cornered the market and resold the lockers at an exorbitant rate. And it's my theory that the reason Undine has such a gigantic locker room is because of that. So there was this town gown thing also going on where the skating club would get mad because their furniture would get wrecked during the summer, and the rowers were, you know, had their issues with the skating club. So I think they were all happy to move out and build their own buildings. That's not exactly a question, but I thought it was interesting to add to the discussion.
And if I recall correctly, I think Thomas Aikens' father was a member of the skating club, and Thomas Aikens himself was a serious skater, as was his sister, who was also a rower. So yeah, there's some interesting connections there.
Mhm.
Too bad it didn't
Other
do
questions?
a
Well, we focused mostly on the capital development program Shore Her Up, which is an incredible story for any private boat club to do, and this was done without the benefit of a huge endowment. You know, it was all done with you women, you know, organizing this, managing it, creating the value for the club, and at the same time, you've got a great competitive history as well. And so, you know, my first recollection of the competitive success of PGRC was the Vichy 8, of course, which was inducted into the NRF Hall of Fame, I believe 2 years ago. Is that correct, Sophie? I think so.
I don't know whether it was 2 or 3 years ago. but it was within the last 4 years.
It was 2 years ago.
It was 2 years. Barb, you want to talk about that?
No, it was 2 years ago, and most of us were there to commemorate it. It was quite an honor to.
There was one celebration at the head of the Charles and another one in New York the following month.
Yes, one was the U.S. rowing, and the other one was whatever the.
One was USRA, that was in November.
Yes, it was quite an honor. It was nice to be recognized after all these years, even though I don't think we really thought about recognition
Not
at
at
any point.
You might want to remind people what year that was and why it was so significant.
What year it was? It was 1967. It was after the second Women's Nationals. There were the United States, although they had consistently sent men to international rowing regattas and the Olympics, there were no women rowing in the Olympics. And the president of FISA, which was the International Rowing Board, invited us to go. And we accepted. I think that was many of the oars women at that regatta were very excited to see a U.S. crew, because then they knew that things are opening up, and they did. Very exciting time, we just rode our hearts out. That's what it was. So.
Great.
So Sophie,
As far as the future is concerned, the future of PGRC, I'd be interested in hearing from all of you. When PGRC started in 1938, there certainly weren't really any competitive rowing opportunities for women prior to that in Philadelphia. There may have been some elsewhere, but so PGRC is still an all women's club. It's a 501c3, and you very, very successfully outreach every year, and you organize a huge Learn to Row program. Probably the Learn to Row program, which is probably the envy of all the other clubs on Boathouse Row.
We don't call it Learn to Row. We take a certain number of women each year in the spring, and they need to be members before we teach them to row. We tell them that we'll take you any size, any color, as long as you're able to lift a certain amount of weight and are in good health. And so we have a waiting list each year.
And you have to know how to swim.
They have to know how to swim. By the way, Ruth Robin Holt never knew how to swim. That was a secret that she told me. But now that I can tell you that she
didn't know that.
So, and these women go through a training program with the coach, and then they are matched to someone, 2 or 3 other experienced women within the club who take them through the ins and outs of rowing on the Schuylkill, which has gotten a little hairy anymore.
It's our Big Sister, Little Sister program.
Right, the Big Sister, Little Sister program. They absolutely have to write a letter and tell us why they want to be a member of PGRC, because we just don't want to teach people how to row. Other places can do that. What we want are interested women who want to row and want the community of women.
We want members, not just rowers.
Right, members.
Invested members.
Right, and we bring them in according to letter date.
How many members do you have currently, Sophie? I think you mentioned 110, is that correct?
Right, 110. We have about 55 women on a weekly basis that row at all hours, starting with 5:30, 6 o'clock, which is nuts, then 8 o'clock, and then 10 o'clock, and then some in the afternoon. So it's round the clock rowing.
And Sophie, how would you assess a program like you have and the tie into what you showed us tonight in terms of creating a camaraderie amongst your members? I mean, it certainly took huge effort on everybody's part, but I think it's sort of like a glue that bound you together because had this building you had to deal with. So,
Well, our new people, that's why we match our new people to 2 or 3 experienced women, because we just don't cut them loose after they know how to do a stroke on the river. They are watched and they are called, or they call their big sister. We also have a show and rows, which you come in at 8 o'clock, you row, and then you eat. And so that's how.
So we also, in our membership, right off the bat, when we talk to the potential new novices, what's expected of a membership, we kind of expect everybody to contribute to the house in some way, whether it's volunteering in any capacity. And we know that, lives happen, people have things going on, and, we let people choose, but it's stressed that we want everybody to be involved and invested in, it's their club. You're a part owner when you join the club.
I have to interrupt you a moment and tell you it hasn't changed much since the 60s.
That's good.
That was the
good.
way it was in the 60s. We were expected to polish those wood floors, etc.
We outsource some of that stuff now, but polishing
but
floors.
there's the the captain is responsible for the boats and racing and stuff like that, but she has to have a group of people who help and keep tabs on the boats. We have a committee that deals with the yard and the plants outside and that kind of thing. I mean, there's all sorts of committees and ways that people in the club contribute.
We used to have a
The
beer
thing is,
meister.
if there is a complaint, I follow up on the complaint.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if our women don't see someone for a while, someone makes a phone call to find out how they are.
I think another important part is when the novices get their keys at the September meeting.
Yeah.
And it's a big party.
Big deal.
And every novice stands up and tells us a little bit about herself. And then there's applause after every novice. So we kind of build self-worth that way, and camaraderie and membership, so that, we want members. We want members.
This is Lois. Lois
Hey, Lois.
Sunshine. Hi, I joined the club in 1965, and I can't comment about rowing. I don't row too much anymore. I'd have to roll into the boat and out of the boat. But as far as camaraderie, I'm still friends and see people I rowed with in the 60s. I mean, that's incredible. I joined 1965, and in fact, there's a small group of us that meet for lunch on the first Friday of every month, and that's specifically because of the Philadelphia Girls Rowing Club and the friends we made then, and the memories that we have there. So enough said. But it's phenomenal. I am overwhelmed with what I'm hearing.
Thanks for that, Lois.
Hi, it's Liesl Hood. I've been a member of the Girls Club for 45 years, and the first time you come into the club, you are welcomed. The new members are told throughout the whole 6 weeks that they're learning how to row. They're told about the history of the club. They're told about not just how to row, but how to become a good member. And within that first 6 weeks, if we lose one person, that's probably one every 5 years that you lose. We don't lose them during that time. Our retention rate is pretty good, and especially in the last 10 years, our retention rate is really amazing. I row with people that have been rowing for 55 years, and we go out twice a week. We go out in the middle of the day when it's nice out and we don't have to deal with all
Cruise.
the people that are out at 6 in the morning and or at 4 in the afternoon. We paid our dues that way, and we can do this. But there are a lot of people that do go out at 6 and 7 and 7:30 and 8, and it is wonderful to see the number of women that are rowing out of the girls' club in the morning. We have a major presence on the river every morning. It's just really amazing.
Liesl, talk about when you and I had a slide for you about the boats at PGRC and how they're rigged for women and how
Yeah,
important.
every single boat in the boathouse is made for a woman, and the shells are different for women and men. Most women, as everybody pretty much knows, have hips, and they are slightly different from the guys' hips, and so they you fit in a boat a little bit differently. Even when you are a skinny mini or somebody who's a little bit heavier, you still have to fit into the boat. If you're a 120-pound woman, you still have hips. So it's kind of important to be able to fit into a boat and be comfortable when you row and not have bow bite like we did in the early 80s and the late 70s. We would end up getting bow bite on the you're, even though you're skinny, you're like you can't fit through the bow. But every single boat in our boathouse is built for a woman, and
Even
it's
have the tracks for the foot stretchers moved towards the seat because
some
women
of
have
them
shorter legs.
we have people that are really tall. We have some women that are short. So we've had extensions put on the foot stretchers, the attachments, I guess track. I don't know what they're called them. They're not tracks, but where you attach your foot stretchers. So that the people that are short can fit into the same boat and have a good row. We put spacers on the oar locks so that if you're taller, you can raise or lower the oar locks so that you can have the right height. And it's important to be able to know how to row. It's important when you go out in a gig that the boat is rigged properly, and we make sure that that's done. I know that I go through the boats periodically and check the rigging. For those of you that don't know me, in my years of rowing, I've coached a million times and learned from Jim Barker how to rig a boat. And so, it's just important to make sure that all the parts are working, that the foot stretchers are in working order. And, we have other members that work with this too. Blake Adams was our captain for many years, and she really worked hard to cultivate her lieutenants to help her with making sure these boats were rowable. It's not just one person that does all this, but the building is the building. We need the building, but the boats are what we really enjoy. But we appreciate the building and everything that goes into it, including the heat that we have. We had heat before many other boathouses had heat. So we can row in the winter and not have a porta potty. And, not too many boathouses do that anymore, but it's good to have hot water in the winter time. Early 80s, we didn't have that. So we have come a long way. But and the racing has changed a little bit. We now have a stronger master's program than we did earlier. In the 60s and 70s, we had a really strong senior team. In 80s, we had a really strong senior team, and different women have raced it internationally, not just the VC8, which I really, really appreciate, by the way, because without them, all of women's rowing in the United States would have a different picture. So, they set the foreground for the rest of us who came after them to be able to race internationally. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share, is that you have to give back. When you join the girls club, you learn from day one that you're going to be expected to give back. And you learn the history and how important it is for women and women's rowing to have these type of people.
Thanks, Liesel, for that.
Sure.
Thanks, Liesel. Joan Shaw, I rowed for the Girls Club in 1950-51. Way
Wow.
back. True. Then I went off to school and moved away from Philadelphia. Did not get back to Philadelphia until the 70s, when I became a referee licensed by the NAAO, since there was still no women's organization. Well, there was a women's organization, but they could not license me. But I am still refereeing. I'm now 92 years old.
Wow.
Thanks for that.
That's all I have to say.
Do you have any specific recruiting program where you're using targeted communications and social media and all that? Or is it just a question of putting an announcement out there, going to open to learn to row, and you invite people to apply?
The application process, they have to.
That might be a good idea.
And the letter is what brings them in. We don't look for members. We have a waiting list now, 40 women. Every year, there's a waiting list.
Sophie, I think that
Mostly
was a
word of
historical
mouth, I
question.
think.
I'm sorry, what?
I think it was a historical question for Joan.
Oh, sorry. Joan?
Pardon?
No.
I'm under Jody Wachlin's name, so.
What was their question?
What was the question, please?
Oh, it was actually just a general question for all the PGRC leadership people here. Do you have a specific targeted recruitment program where you go on social media and all this stuff, or is it just an invitation, an open invitation, and you just
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
I live in California, so I have nothing.
It's word of mouth.
The information is on our website. The other thing is, when someone comes in, they are told they have to give time to learn the sport. That means at least 3 hours a day for 3 days for 6 to 8 weeks. And that they need to commit to that.
Without also, as a former novice coach, it's really important to inform the novices very early on, especially as you're learning to row our motion on the erg, so that you get the motion down before you get on the water. If early in that process, if you miss 1 day, you are going to be significantly behind in your rowing ability. So that's the kind of thing that we emphasize with the novices. You can't miss a day, because you're going to be on the water and everybody's going to be at hands away, and you're not even going to know what that means. True. That's critical.
So the other thing that we do with the novice program is, even if we call it the novice program, it's really a new member program. Even if you have come in with experience, you're still expected to help out with teaching the new members how to row, because we don't just put you out in a gig and send you on your merry way, which actually did happen to me when I first started rowing, but that was another time. But back then, but what we do now is we have an experienced person in the bow who will set the boat up, take the boat across the river, and is very, very patient. And sometimes we'll have people that have rowed for a long time that join the club, and they still go through this program. They can row at other times, but they're expected to help out with the novice program. That's when you learn about the club. You learn, how our club works. You learn to meet members. You meet all of our members over the course of 2 months, and you really get an appreciation for how hard it is to make this boathouse work, have the equipment, the quality equipment that we have, and what we expect of our members. Everybody owns our boats. We all own our boats, and we don't mistreat them. So we make sure that everybody knows how to do it and do it our way. If you learned how to do this in college, it might have been different. You had a boatman. We don't have a boatman. We have a captain and her lieutenants and the rest of our membership. So it's important.
The other
And I-
thing is sweep rowers come in from college and they really can't scull.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're a sculling club. And, you know, Liesel's been one of our championship scullers, single sculler, 7 national championships. And, you know, the competitive nature of the club has really built our legacy also.
Yeah. And I think, Chris, the point people are making is that it's not like a club that offers a learn to row weekend and you go in and then you leave. It's I think what everybody is saying is that it's about joining the community of women who are members of this club, and it's and the rowing that's the joy of rowing that brings people together, some of whom may or may not know how to row when they join. But it's not something where you see a poster that says learn to row in a weekend and come to the girls club. It's not like that.
Thanks. That was a good explanation, Lily. Thank you.
Yes.
I love it.
Anything else, Chris or Jen or Rick?
Let's.
I was just gonna mention for our viewers that our second story hour was actually on the Vichy 8. So you can go watch that from 2021 to learn more about Vichy 8.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
Can I add a little bit?
Oh my God, please. I can't.
Sure
It's
can.
Parthenia. I just wanted to say, someone who was a member back in 1986, primarily because my husband, who was a member of Undine at the time, since the 70s, said, you know, you should consider joining Girls Club, and introduced me to people. And I've always relished having done so, because I've met some wonderful ladies who I do still communicate with and do things with outside of what I do. And even though I'm a member of a couple of other clubs, this has been one of my most special memberships. And I was a past vice president and a past secretary. So I remember how important it was to contribute and be a part. And I'm refereed at the Braxton and all of these different things. And just really, really value the sisterhood.
That's awesome.
Thank you,
Parthenia. Thanks for
everyone. Before we close tonight, I feel obligated to recognize a special guest that we have in the audience. And Ken, I've unmuted you, so you are on. I was wondering if you could please introduce our special guest for the evening.
Well, I'm sitting here with a young man that was a year behind me in college, but we rode together at LaSalle College. I'm sitting here with Stan Kwiklinski, Olympic gold medalist, 3-seat in the 1964 Vesper 8. And it's just been a wonderful evening for Stan and I to listen to all of you. I started my high school rowing in 1956, so I've been around for a few years too. Stan, was there anything you'd like to offer? Well, let me offer this. Stan will be at the head of the Schuylkill signing his new book weekend after next. And there's also a reception at Vesper Boat Club after the head of the Schuylkill on Saturday evening. Stan, take it from there.
Or to
Also be under the tent at the Angels during the day on Saturday the 26th. If you all come down and say hello, I'd appreciate that. With Dottie Brown being right next to me.
is interested in this book. Or talking.
That's great,
Thank
Stan.
you
That was
very much for joining us, Ken and Stan. That's wonderful.
And that's a great segue into we hope everyone that is in Philadelphia or traveling to Philadelphia will be joining us for the 50th head of the Schuylkill Regatta this upcoming weekend, 26th, well, I should say next weekend, October 26th and 27th. If you're not racing, you can volunteer. You can go to our website to get more information there at www.hosr.org, or you can always reach out to me and we'll help you out. We're also going to be offering, there are going to be a number of open houses along Boathouse Row. As part of our committee work, we have been organizing an effort to establish a collective digital archive, linking kind of the physical repositories throughout the country, and certainly starting here in Boathouse Row. So our steering committee has begun to kind of hatch a plan, and they have a good plan moving forward with that. And we're actually taking our first kind of dog and pony show to the Undine dinner next week, and reaching out to the boat clubs along the row to talk further about our goals. And we hope everybody will join us.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you so much, Sophie and Lily and Donna and Diana and Dory, everybody. It's just been wonderful. This has been, you know, we've done 21 story hours, and this has been very, very user friendly and conversational, which is really, really great, really wonderful. Thank you very much for all your efforts.
And thanks for sharing your
Thank
passions with
you.
us. This is awesome.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Rick. Thanks, Donna. Thanks,
everyone.
Dory. Thanks, Sophie. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you to our viewers. We'll follow up with an email in the next day or two with this recording if you want to share it with others. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. Good
Bye.
night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.